on camera.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It is 10 a.m. on Friday, November 1st, 2019. I'm Kalinda Lee, Vice President for Historical Interpretation and Community Partnership at the Atlanta History Center. And I'm here with Sue Verhoff, Director of Atlanta History Center's Oral History Program, conducting an oral history with Congressman John Lewis. Mr. Lewis has graciously agreed to be interviewed as part of the Atlanta History Center's partnership with the Inman Park Neighborhood Association. And so the issues that we'll be focusing on today will have to do in large part with that association. But I always like to begin at the beginning. And so I want to ask you a little bit about being an Atlantan. I know that you were born in Alabama, but you've lived in Atlanta for many, many years. So tell us a little bit about why you chose to make this city home.
I grew up in rural Alabama. Went to school in Nashville, Tennessee for 6 years and became the chair of an organization called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, better known as SNCC, based in Atlanta. So I moved to Atlanta, 23 years old, had all of my hair, and a few pounds lighter. I fell in love with the city. To be in the city where Martin Luther King Jr. lived, where Benjamin Mays, who was the president of Morehouse College, the city that had Ralph McGill. I read the Atlanta Constitution. I love reading the newspaper. I love the writing of the late Ralph McGill. He was a warrior, a crusader for justice, for civil rights. He spoke up, he stood up. And I just wanted to stay here. So when I was no longer the chair of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, I continued to stay and live in Atlanta. For almost a year, I spent time in New York City, but almost every other weekend, I came back to Atlanta. Atlanta is a place that you fall in love with. You have the colleges, the universities. You have just wonderful, moving people. Atlanta, I fell in love with a young lady. He got married, and I never dreamed or thought about moving someplace else, so I just stayed here. It was the first big city that I lived in. Went to school in Nashville, but Atlanta became my heart.
Thank you. I'd also like to know a little bit more about your decision to choose a career in public service, and particularly as an elected official. What led you to that, and what has kept you as a servant of the people in that way since 1987?
Being part of the American Civil Rights Movement, I had an opportunity to travel all across our country. In 1963, I had an opportunity to meet President Kennedy and confer with him, to meet his brother Robert Kennedy. And I met a lot of local elected officials in different cities around America. And I saw politics as a calling, that you could do something, you could make a contribution. And sometimes you had to be strong and insist. Sometimes you have to be bold, brave. And people would ask, why are you saying this? Why are you doing that? And my philosophy was very simple then, as it is today. When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, You have to assess something. You have to do something. And I remember meeting with Martin Luther King Jr. and several other leaders of the civil rights movement and discussing it and debating with President Kennedy. He didn't like the idea of a march on Washington. He said, if you march on Washington, will there be violence and chaos and disorder? And we will never, ever get a civil rights bill through the Congress. And we all spoke up and said, Mr. President, this will be an orderly, peaceful, non-violent protest. He said, well, I think you may have problems. There was a man by the name of A. Philip Randolph, who was born in Jacksonville, Florida, moved to New York City and became a champion of civil rights and human rights and labor rights, sort of joined in and sort of kept preaching and getting the attention of the president. And so we all agreed, it was 6 of us, and we all were singing from the same songbook. And we pulled it off. We organized people all across America. And the day came on August 28, 1963, for the march. I spoke number 6. I was the youngest speaker. And it was so successful that President Kennedy invited us down to the White House to meet with him. He stood in the door of the Oval Office, and he kept saying to each one of us, you did a good job, you did a good job. And when he got to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he said, you did a good job, and you had a dream. That was my last time seeing President Kennedy. But I felt like it was a calling for me to do what I could. So I got to know his brother, Robert Kennedy, very, very well. And I campaigned for him. I was with him in Indianapolis, Indiana, when we heard that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had been assassinated. It was a very sad time and a dark hour. But we kept on trying to do what we could to help. And later, in June, around June 5th or 6th, I was in Bobby Kennedy's suite at a hotel in Los Angeles when he was shot. I broke down and cried. And I made a decision then that I would do what I could to help tame American politics. And I decided to run for office.
So you have an incredibly storied, iconic career on a national stage as a public servant. You're here today because the neighbors in Inman Park, in a very kind of hyper-local neighborhood focus, claim you as their own and feel a special connection with you at that kind of level. And I find this fascinating because often people complain in terms of national politics that we never see our congressman or we don't know our congressman, that our congressman is not intimately connected with us. I would like to know a little bit about why it's important to you to stay intimately connected with your constituents, to be close at a neighborhood level.
It is important. It is a must to stay in tune with the people that elected you, to see them as often as possible, to visit the neighborhood, not just go into a restaurant and get something to eat or to go to a church, but to be there, to understand. Metro Atlanta is very large. And at one time, I had every inch of the city in my district. There have been so many people who have moved into Metro Atlanta. So I have other parts of, and I don't have all of the city, but I fell in love with Inman Park. It's a wonderful, wonderful neighborhood. As a matter of fact, with my wife, we looked for several weeks and maybe months to buy a house in Inman Park. Uh, we couldn't afford it, but we dreamed that one day we will own a house in Inman Park. Beautiful. It reminded me of the city and the suburbs, maybe a little of the country sort of coming together. But I had so many wonderful friends in Inman Park. They embraced me. They supported me. And I fell in love with them, and I think they loved me.
Tell me a little bit more, please, about what specifically you like about Inman Park. What makes it unique and interesting to you?
The people, they're good people. They're wise. They're kind. They're considerate. And you felt at home. I love the old, beautiful homes. Some of the homes reminded me when I was growing up in rural Alabama. They're large. They sort of invited you to come in, to enjoy, to have a meal. I got involved in attending the Inman Park Festival that take place during the last weekend of April each year. And just to go and be able to walk down the streets and celebrating. When the Democratic Convention met in Atlanta, along with my wife, we had sort of invited people to come to Inman Park and see the real Atlanta, to celebrate, to enjoy. And the people, the citizens that owned the homes, they opened up their homes and made them available for people to see, to come in, to have something to eat, something to drink, and just rest and relax. And along the way, that was an attempt to bring a road through the heart of the park, through the heart of these neighborhoods. And the people wanted my help, and I said, yes, I will help. This is before I got elected to anything. And I joined the cause, supported them, protested, wrote letters, made telephone calls. And one day, because of what was going on, a former president, along with some other elected officials, wanted to support a major road, a 4-lane road, coming through the heart of Inman Park. It would have destroyed some of the homes. It would have destroyed the beauty of the neighborhood. And I objected along with others and did what I could to stop it. And in the end, I think we succeeded.
Inman Park neighbors have told me over and over again how indebted they feel to you with regard to the road fight and the stance that you took, the support that you gave. I think it seems like it's one of those definitive things for the neighborhood in terms of your relationship with the neighborhood. Can you tell us a little bit even more about that? Why did you decide to throw your weight behind this effort? You mentioned that you didn't live in the neighborhood, although you certainly have fought for people beyond yourself. But why did this appeal to you so strongly? And can you tell us a little bit more about the efforts that you engaged?
The reason more than anything is I felt the people, these neighbors, come together, create an unbelievable movement. It's just the movement of people. They didn't have the support of all of the elected officials, but they were sailing against the wind. They needed help. And I thought I could use my voice, that I could engage in nonviolent protests that I had learned from the civil rights movement, to be a witness. And to me, the people grew, I grew, became a stronger and better person. And when I go back and visit, or when I'm there, it's almost like a love affair. The people in the Inman Park neighborhood love me. They claim me to be their own, and I love them. Since being in Washington in the Congress, I don't get a chance to see them as much as I would like, to visit the neighborhood, the shops. But it's a wonderful effort, and when you accomplish something, you don't give up, you keep the faith, you keep your eyes on the prize, and that's what we did. We did it together. So it was more than John Lewis. It was a crusade. It was a community, more than a neighborhood. But there was different neighborhoods coming together to make Inman Park stronger, wiser. And I think politicians in years to come will not take people for granted in Atlanta, but especially not in the Inman Park neighborhood.
Tell me a little bit more about that, please. You ended on this note saying politicians won't take people for granted. Did you feel like there were rewards and consequences for politicians with regard to their stance on the road?
Well, I think there was some individuals, some maybe a member of the Atlanta City Council, and others in different places in high office, tried or attempted to take people for granted. They didn't know, they didn't realize that they had a fight on their hand. Just ordinary people coming together, using what I call people's power. Not hundreds and thousands or millions of dollars, but using the power of people. Saying, in effect, no, you will not build full-lane roads or highways through this neighborhood. And it sent a message to people throughout Metro Atlanta.
One of the neighbors in Inman Park told me that she thought that you loved Inman Park because people in Inman Park like to get in good trouble. And I thought I would ask you about that. Do you see this as a neighborhood where people like to get in good trouble?
I'm not so sure that people like to get in good trouble. But the whole good trouble idea, I would tell you something about it. When I was growing up in rural Alabama, and I would ask my mother and my father, grandparents, why this, why that? There was a boy, don't get in trouble. When I asked by those signs that said, white men, colored men, white women, colored women, they said, don't get in trouble. That's the way it is. But growing up, I heard about Rosa Parks. I heard the words of Dr. King on the old radio. And I was inspired to get in what I call good trouble, necessary trouble. And I've been getting in trouble ever since. And for people to threaten to arrest me, I got arrested 40 times during the 60s. And since I've been in Congress, another 5 times. And I'm probably going to get arrested again for something. Because sometimes you have to use your body, use your ideas to bear witness to the truth.
I get the impression in this neighborhood and in this district that people have latched onto that idea. Whether it's been about the road fight or in being able to revitalize the neighborhood or engage in building projects, whatever the case might be. Are there other projects that you've been involved with Inman Park in particular, where people have worked kind of shoulder to shoulder with you in helping to build the community?
Well, I think the Inman Park effort tend to stand out, perhaps as, forget about the civil rights movement. All across the South, I got involved in projects, but perhaps more than any other neighborhood, more than any other effort in Atlanta, in this part of Georgia, Inman Park stand out. It's a place where people use their resources, their time, their space, to do something, to mount a movement. And it's a lesson to other neighborhoods, other communities and towns and cities, that when you want something, you have to fight for it. You have to stand up. You have to organize the unorganized and be willing to get out there and push and pull. And I think there are a lot of would-be politicians and a lot of people in the larger community will be reminded that, you know what happened. They would say, you know what happened in Inman Park. You know what happened. They were selling against mayors, a mayor, against members of the city council that I later became a member of, selling against a president in powerful business industry interests. So it's a lesson not just for Metro Atlanta, for the state of Georgia, but for the nation, when people can be reminded of what happened in that community or in that neighborhood, better known as Inman Park.
Well, one of the ways that we remember locally that work is that the street has been named for you, much smaller and limited thoroughfare has been named in your honor. Tell us a little bit about that. How do you feel about that? What does that cause you to reflect on?
I'm very grateful that a group of citizens, along with members of the Atlanta City Council, came up with the idea naming a parkway after me. And every so often I have an opportunity to ride the Parkway. But I'm very grateful, really. Grateful to the people. Almost every single year I participate in the parade. And to me, it's one of the highlights of my life. To go and see all of these adults, middle-aged, older people, was to see all of the young people. And to see all of these young people and to me, John Lewis, you came to my school. I try to go around and visit as many schools as possible. Reading to children, talking to children, responding to their questions. And a lot of the young people, not just in Inman Park, but throughout the city, but especially some of the schools in the city, they're black, they're white, they're Hispanic. They come and visit my office in Washington. The public schools, the private schools, and from time to time they sit on the floor because we don't have a great many chairs for people. But one good thing, the Georgia C.A.U.T.I.O.N Commission presented a small bale of cotton to every member of the Georgia congressional delegation. And so as a chair, it's a small bale of cotton that people can come and sit on. And it reminded me so much of growing up in Alabama, where we had to pick cotton and get cotton gin. And so now I can see cotton being made useful as a seat for little children who come and visit Washington from the state of Georgia or from the city of Atlanta.
The comments that you just made are such a bridge, right, between the past and the present. Thinking about your work as a very young man and kind of moving through and thinking about the kinds of contributions that you want to make and the kind of community that you want to build to its present status. I am wondering if you could share with us a little bit more about what you see now in your district and in Inman Park in particular, what it looks like to you, what it feels like to you, what you love about it, where you think there's work still to be done.
Well, in the city, not just in Inman Park, but throughout the city, we need to find ways to humanize our neighborhoods, our communities, and make it easy and simple for people to move around, for people during the spring and the summer to be able to enjoy. We got to rid our cities and our towns, our neighborhoods of violence. There's too much gun violence. So I've taken a strong stand over doing something about the proliferation of guns. Matter of fact, I led a sit-in on the floor of the House for 26 hours trying to get the Congress to do something to make our neighborhoods, to make our communities a little more peaceful. It's hard for young children to go out to play. It's hard for senior citizens to sit on their front porch in their rocking chairs. And we got to do better to create cities and towns and neighborhoods at peace.
Absolutely. I want to, with a laser focus, ask that question a little bit differently and again as well. Specifically for Inman Park, if you had a vision for the community moving forward, if you could visit Inman Park in 20 years, what would you like to see? What would you like for it to be like?
To continue to be a shining example for Inman Park, to continue to be a shining example of a neighborhood in the heart of the city that can peacefully coexist with everything going on around it. Maybe somehow, in some way, we can have more green space where children and seniors can share together, where people can enjoy the outdoors, where people can play and walk and be at home. It's possible. Maybe city planners can look at the possibility of closing some of the streets and making more spaces for people just to walk or stroll. Maybe we don't need as many cars, or maybe they should be parked someplace else.
You talked about just now, as you were sharing that vision, what planners might be able to do to help to bring that vision to fruition. If you had advice for neighbors, Inman Park neighbors, I'm an Ormwood Park neighbor. If you had advice for neighbors about what they could do to help bring that vision to fruition, what
I
would
think,
that be?
I think neighbors coming together can say to city administrators and to planners and others, this is what we like, this is what we want. There should be ways to honor people who have lived in this neighborhood for many, many years, to tell the story, to share stories. I notice in parts of the city I'm seeing more and more posters, photographs of people being placed on stones. Our children and their children need to know what was the city of Atlanta like 50 years ago, 60 years ago, 100 years ago. What was it like when Ralph McGill, or Ivan Allen, or Martin Luther King Jr., or Daddy King walked these streets to live here? In Inman Park, there was a black business person. I only knew him as being Deacon Burden, who fried chicken, cooked chicken. And it was very good chicken. You can smell it miles and miles away. And one day, one of the citizens, a young lady, invited him to come to Washington for a fundraiser for me. He had never been on an airplane before. And he came. He brought his skillet, his frying pan, and you could smell the chicken, and it was good chicken, and all of the members of Congress wanted to come and eat some of that chicken. But we can share the stories and the activities that people engage in. And that we should find some way to honor people, thank people. People who taught in some of these schools, some of the ministers, or some of the churches.
As a person who loves to research history, what you say about sharing stories really resonates with me. And I was thinking about, I don't know who said this quote, but I read a quote recently where someone said, the best memorial is a conversation. And I was thinking about that as you were talking and thinking about, so for Inman Park neighbors, I would ask you, what is your best memory? What specific story do you recall that makes you happy, it makes you smile about Inman Park or an experience you had there?
Well, I have so many. But meeting in individuals' home, and when you had a victory, people laugh, people smile. They would sing, they would dance, have a good meal to celebrate that victory. And Inman Park, like so many other places, had victories. And you don't sweep your victory under the rug. You let that light shine so other people will be inspired. So if they can do it in Inman Park, then we can do it in our neighborhood.
What have I forgotten that feels important to you?
I don't think you've forgotten anything. It's those of us who sort of live through what was going on. I think we were more than lucky. We were blessed to work together, to pull together for the common good. we were threatened with being arrested and jailed for some of the protests that we engaged in. But people didn't give up. They kept the faith. They held on. They believed in something. And I think it made for a lot of the participants in the Inman Park struggle, the movement, stronger and wiser and maybe a better human being. But when you have victory sometimes, it lifts you, take you to another place.
Will you be riding in the parade this year?
Yes. In the new year?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I have health and strength. I will be there. I think in the past few years, I seldom miss a parade. Because to be in a parade, I love to walk and sometimes just get out and run in the parade, but they tell me that I slow down the movement, and they prefer for me to ride and stay in the car. But you get out and you touch people, you shake hands, you hug people, and there are people that you haven't seen in a while. And it gives you energy, gives you strength.
Ladies, do you have any additional questions for the Congressman?
I don't know, what do you think is that? It feels sometimes to me, hearing these stories, because I wasn't there, that it feels like this bottled magic that happened, to have all these people coming together and volunteering while they're rehabbing homes and raising children and working. What do you think it was that made that time so special and made that fight so, I don't know, it's almost legendary in a way. It was so...
Well, I believe that people have been imbued with a spirit. And it was like, I think in the biblical sense, there was like fire in my bones, that you get touched with something, and it just grows. And there were people coming from different parts of the neighborhood, and from other parts of the city, in support of what was happening in Inman Park. So it was like fire shed up in my bone. I think that's sort of biblical. So you have to do something with it. You have to go out and try to do something good as a community. You become like a family, an extended family.
Thank you for taking this time to share your memories and your wisdom with us. We greatly appreciate it. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. You're more than welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.